All right, friends, welcome back to the Applied Leadership Podcast. My name is Blaine Smith, and I'm here as always with my friend and partner, Brandon Young. And we are two friends with one question, half an hour, and zero script. And we've got an interesting question today. It's one that we could spend hours on, and I'm not sure that I have a really concise perspective on this, so it'll be fun to chat about with you, Brandon.
So here we go.
Here we go.
Buckle up, everybody.
This is how this works. It's really all about social media, and you and I have a fairly long and probably a little bit complicated relationship with social media, both in our professional and our personal lives. But no doubt about it, it's here to stay. It's part of the professional world. It's part of how brands and companies and people communicate. A guy like Cal Newport might say that it's non-essential, and maybe he's right. Somebody like Seth Godin, who we really admire, might say, hey, just pick one or maybe two of these things and be good at it and don't worry about the rest. Or you might get a guy like Gary Vee, who says you should be doing all of them all the time if you really want to win, and you got to be kind of all in on it. And I don't know that any one of those three is exactly right, but I think it's probably a personal thing. So I thought that's maybe what we would do here on this podcast, just talk a little bit about how we think about social media as it relates to our business. I know you and I both have some fairly strong thoughts on this as it pertains to our personal lives and our kids and things like that. But maybe let's try, if we can, to keep it focused a little bit on the role that it plays in our work and in our business. And I don't think we know enough about this to be prescriptive or make any strong recommendations how others might use it, but perhaps it would be useful to hear a little bit about how a couple of guys who are 45 years old and grew up without the internet, but have done most of their working life with it, think about these things. So how does that sound to you?
It sounds good. And I think that this will be a bit of a discussion where it's just kind of free flowing, streams of consciousness here. And I think that you alluded to our relationship with social media, and it immediately brings me back to our time at Team Red, White, and Blue. And in that, we did a lot of work on social media, predominantly on Facebook, and so much to the fact that Facebook actually was looking at us as one of their case studies one year. I don't remember what year it was, but it was the power of using the social network to engage others in meaningful ways, in ways that generated positive outcomes. At the time, we probably had 200 some odd communities across the United States that were heavily using Facebook as a platform to connect with others, to share information, to host events, to share the impact of events, have meaningful conversations. And it should go noted that we had guidelines in place. We had certain expectations in place on how we were going to use that medium. For example, if you were going to share with others within your chapter, it was not a place for sharing solicitations. We were not soliciting, we were not allowing people to solicit to our members, because we wanted it to be a place where meaningful and open and productive interactions were happening. And so we did a lot of limiting in that regard. And that history with Facebook included us going on site, and I'll never forget the map, the heat map of all the people that were using, and the active counter of the new members and things like that. And so I'll just start my comments by saying that I've really seen the power of good that a social network can generate. And I'm conflicted about it, because I also see a lot of the downside of some of these platforms and how they are being used, and projecting personas instead of sharing your personality with people. Misinformation, disinformation, fake friend requests. The constant requests that I get from I don't know why, but on LinkedIn, it's like weekly. I get it's a young Chinese supermodel who happens to be a CEO and is really interested in my work, and I'm like, you're not an actual person. So it's convoluted We have a lot of history with it.
Yeah.
I got a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah. So I'll stay in the Wayback Machine for a little bit, because I will say, and I don't think it would be too strong a statement to say that we largely built that organization on Facebook. I mean, there was a lot of other things going on behind the scenes, but Facebook pages and Facebook groups was not just kind of, I think we think now a lot about social media as kind of a promotional or a marketing tool or an entertainment tool. But back then, we were no kidding organizing and kind of structurally running our business in many ways using the Facebook platform, where people were sharing important information and schedules and taking attendance and things by people going to Facebook events. And one of the things we learned in doing that was, while it was effectively a free tool that allowed us to organize at scale and was a miracle of modern technology in a lot of ways, and I remain very grateful for the opportunity, we also learned that it's probably not wise to structure your business on a social media platform who can snap their fingers and change the rules at a moment's notice. Because what we started to learn as we got a little deeper into our business and it became a bit more mature was that, Facebook could just change the rules about how people were seeing posts or how groups would work or how you could use events. And we might have an SOP in place for how we did these things, and it would work pretty well. But 3 or 4 months later, that could all change. And now we're left scrambling, having to pick up the pieces and reorient people. And, you don't really own your own data on a social media platform. So it's not like having an email list or a CRM platform that really does have user data and things that you can track longitudinally and ways in which you can interact with people. You're really doing it completely on their terms. And so it became a two-sided coin for us. One side of the coin was obvious that, wow, for a free tool, we were able to do a ton of organizing and really elevate our organization very, very quickly in ways that were largely positive. But then we got to a point where we had to start facing the other side of the coin, which was, we're going to have to now move away from this platform as our primary communication and organizing tool, which, by the way, is going to be very painful. Or we're gonna die on here because they're going to change the rules and things aren't going to work the same way. And that put us at a number of tricky crossroads that we had to navigate. So, I have kind of mixed feelings toward it in that way. But I would just say, if I have any advice on this, it would be just be careful about how much you outsource to a social media platform in terms of growing a business, because there are a lot of people that are making high 6-figure, maybe even 7-figure businesses on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. But if you get your account banned because someone reports you for something that may or may not even be true, you could be shut down and your whole business could be folded up in a moment's notice. And so as a business person, I think about that now, which is there a way that we can, and maybe this moves the conversation forward, Brandon, is there a way that we can share things that are valuable for people that we feel good about and proud of? And is there a way that we can meaningfully promote our business in a way that's honest and earnest, that can bring us the right kinds of customers, clients, and partners? If we can do those things, that's what we want to do. But I would probably draw the line right there in terms of doing much more with it. And that's probably a limitation I have, again, not being a digital native and not loving the platforms. But that's probably where I come out on it.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. And in what you were just saying, it made me think about a truth that we all know, which is nothing in this world is free. So we talk about it being, a free platform, right? Or the freemium model or whichever. And I think that it's wise for us to consider what is the overt or covert value chain involved with any of these things, because it's there somewhere. And I think that we see that oftentimes it feels covert with these social media kind of things, because that they're consistently collecting on you. And I start to feel a little bit yucky about that. I don't particularly like it. And when we think about going in the Wayback Machine, that's really informed by a lot of my own experiences. There were years of my life where I couldn't tell my wife where I was going, working in a special operations unit. And I think that for me, when I got out of the military, I started to share more broadly on social media. It was a bit of an effort for me to kind of come out from behind the shadows, so to speak. And I did feel like especially for some relationships out there, I had kind of fallen off the face of the planet for 11 years when I was in that setting, which was by necessity. And so I wanted to figure out how to use the platform and put myself back out there and share in meaningful ways. And ultimately, I realized on the latter half of it, as it relates to the idea of what is a covert or an overt value chain, is that, the covert value chain there was a lot of collecting and then retargeting in terms of interests, buying patterns. It's unsettling to feel like my information is being sold and propagated on lists that then end up getting, targeted and retargeted back to me and all these different things. I think as the years went by and as I used these tools more and more, some of those factors started to make me feel just unsettled about it. And I think that's something worth noting for anybody out there. You mentioned, how do we use this in a generative way for our business? I think that's 100% real. We're just like a lot of businesses out there. We share on social media because we want to make sure that we're not only contributing to the conversation in a positive way, which I'd love for our conversation to move in that direction as well, or as to why and how we share, because generosity is one of our core values as a business, as a partnership. But also it's, valuable. I mean, look, this podcast is a wonderful example, right? Like, this podcast is an opportunity for us to share generously. It's also an opportunity for prospective partners to see how we interact and engage unscripted, because we have gotten a lot of positive feedback that one of the things that our partners really appreciate about us is that when we roll into Q&A sessions, we'll take what they give us, we'll interact, we'll engage with them thoughtfully so that it is applicable directly to their setting and not an abstract concept. And so, yeah, that's part of why we do this podcast. I mean, aside from the fact that I just love talking to my friend for 30-minute chunks in unscripted dialogue, it's an opportunity, and that's intentional. And so it makes me wonder if others would feel like that is an covert objective for us. So I guess I'm just making it very overt. We want you to know how we engage.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're comfortable with it, I'll just put it out there. Maybe the next thing we can talk about is just kind of how we use social media as an organization at Applied Leadership Partners, which I'll start off by saying fairly lightly. It's not a big effort within our organization, but we do have kind of a social media strategy. We do talk about it every week, and we do, create and put stuff out there. And I would say for us, it comes down to 2, maybe 3 categories for why we do it and what we do. So the first thing, which you just alluded to, in an effort to be completely transparent, is I think we look at social media as a content marketing opportunity. And by that, what we mean is we create content that we hope is useful and valuable, that people can take and use, and they can have it for free. And some, probably very small percentage of those people may be interested enough, may be in a place, may have an opportunity that they want to partner with us or invite us to come in and work with us in a professional way. And that's one way to kind of organically grow our business. And it's not a huge generator of business for us, but we think that, like you said, sharing things in the format of a podcast or a blog or a long form LinkedIn post is a way for us to let people know who we are, let them know a little bit about how we think, give them a little window into some of the leadership concepts that we're sharing with our clients. And maybe they're interested in having a conversation and bringing us in. That's part of our approach. And it does work to some extent. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. It's content marketing. The other thing I think it does for us is it's a bit of a digital business card. And so people are on the internet now. They're on places like LinkedIn. And, we use Facebook and Instagram a little bit, but by and large, that's where people are finding us. And it's a place for us to just kind of say, hey, here's who we are. We're out here. And you can discover us, I guess, is one way to think about it. It legitimizes the fact that we have a real business. Mm-hmm. And the third thing I think it does for us is it really forces us to clarify our thinking and hone some of the concepts and frameworks that we're working on. And so in the way that writing a blog post really forces you to clarify your thinking on a certain topic, having a conversation like this forces us to think and dig into some of these things and answer questions. And I think social media actually plays a very positive role in our business, is that if we're going to share something with the world, we're not doing it for attention. Primarily, we're doing it because we want for people to see it, read it, hear it, and think, oh man, that's pretty useful. And so in order for us to be proud of it, we've got to put a little effort into it and think about it. And that's a bit of a rising tide for our business. Because truth be told, what we would love most is to own all of our media. Ideally, we'd love people to be checking out our website every week to read the blogs. We'd love people to go to our YouTube channel to watch these podcasts, or to subscribe to us on the podcast platforms, and for us to have more of a direct relationship with our audience. And that's kind of the holy grail. And we'd love to have that. But the fact of the matter is, you can't get to there unless people can find you and can interact with you in a little bit of a lighter way. And so if it were up to me, my dream, Brandon, would be to have lots of people subscribing to the podcast that just get it in their feed. Lots of people going to our website to check out our blogs and things like that. But we're not going to get from here to there if we don't share this stuff on the various social media platforms. And so
that's right.
It's a way
to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way for us to give generously, to meet people, and ideally to generate a little bit of business where people are at.
That's right. And there's a fourth, I would say, objective to this as well, which is actual resource development. We use these resources in our product and service packages. We were just on a cohort call with a group of frontline leaders that are going through our Frontline Leader program. And Sarah rightly mentioned, hey, we actually have a podcast that addresses this. I'm going to drop it to you guys. And I had another thing where, hey, we actually wrote a blog about this, and I'm going to drop that to you guys as well. Just, think about it, see if that's useful. And I really appreciate the point that you're making about what we would prefer, because the intent, the overt intent, is that we exist to serve leaders. That's why we exist. Like our vision is to be able to share hard-earned leadership wisdom with people who are on the front lines conducting missions that matter, wherever that is, in whatever sector people serve within. And so we truly believe that a lot of the world's problems are big L leadership problems. And if we had some more effective and sustainable leadership out there, that we can get through some of these things that are really vexing us as people, really plaguing our society. And so we do give generously in that regard, because we genuinely want to raise the capacity, to raise the bar. So that is an overt intention right there. And I don't mind stating that out front, but it's valuable to note that this is, when we think about things in terms of lines of effort, this doesn't just serve one effort in terms of marketing. It also serves the effort of service to others. It serves the line of effort of content creation, resource creation, assets that we can actually equip our leaders that we are able to serve with. And you just made me think of that, and I'm glad that kind of came up in the conversation, because look, we don't spend an awful lot of time on the platforms necessarily. We have a marketing strategy. We have social media as part of our strategy. We do, however, spend an awful lot of time creating and curating and thinking and researching on all of this content, so that we can be as valuable and useful as possible to those that we distribute this information to.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I'm glad you said that about the resources. And again, we're pretty light on advice, I think, here for a lot of people, but that's one thing I would offer is, if you're going to create something, make it good enough that you could repurpose it and use it again. And it's not just like a pithy kind of hot take on something, but think hard enough about it, make something that's good enough that you'd be proud to point people back to it in some other format. Or if you can use it to drive people to your website, that's obviously a great thing. So if it's a good enough hook or a good enough LinkedIn post that people want to actually click on and read the article that then resides on your website, that's a great thing to do. So I would say quality really matters there. I wanted to ask you about another thing, because something that we don't do very much of, and you just said it, is we don't spend a lot of time kind of hanging out on the platforms. We mostly are creating things and then using it as kind of a distribution channel. But there are a lot of people that have gotten a lot of advice that I presume is probably good advice, is that if you want to build an audience on social media, one of the best ways to do it is not just to create your own content, but to go out and interact with other people's content. And I know that's largely true on Twitter or X. I assume that's true on LinkedIn. I see a lot of our veteran friends who are kind of retiring and transitioning now, getting that advice, which is get on LinkedIn and reshare people's stuff, comment on people's stuff, like people's stuff. That's a good way to get people to know who you are and to build a bit of an audience. And candidly, we just don't really do much of that. Like if I'm on there posting something, I might give it a few scrolls to see what people I know have posted. And if it's good, I'll certainly like it, maybe reshare it, maybe comment on it. But it's more like just, I want to pat friends on the back that have written something smart or said something that's worth noting. But how do you think about that? Because I do think it's probably a legitimate approach. I don't think we really do it. Any thoughts on that? Like getting on and more like interacting with people on the social media platforms as a way to meet people, make friends, build an audience?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that I feel like I could do a better job at interacting with other content out there. And much of the reason why I do not spend an additional amount of time seeking out, searching for things is because I am more engaged with the dialogue, whether it be through text, phone, emails that people are sending us, relationships like that. I could be accused of being a man of extreme focus, and I would accept that because that's how I have mostly lived my life. And when here, be here is something that I think about often. I really want to be fully present, and I find it very difficult for myself to be fully present and surf the posts, the interwebs, all the social media stuff to find things that I find relevant or very thoughtful, to engage in. Not to say that there's not a lot of relevant and thoughtful stuff. It's just to say that I find that for me, I have a hard time because it lends to distraction for me. It typically takes me into deeper holes that may pull me away from the work or the focus or frankly the people that I'm right there in front of. And that's part of the reason why I appreciate you asking this question and how I think about it, because what I have found for myself is that I really need to limit my engagement with it because I am so interested and intrigued by what my friends are doing. My buddies who are retiring, or folks that have written a thoughtful article or an interesting blog. It's very easy for me to stay in that and stay engaged in that. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I much rather would pull myself out of that and shoot that person a note, a text, even if it's an IM on one of these platforms, and say, hey, I've seen what you're doing out there. I think it's really great. I just reached out to a colleague I hadn't spoken to in 11 years, maybe, or 12 years. We were sales directors together at Quest Diagnostics, and just said, hey, I see what you're up to out there. And, can we just grab a virtual cup of coffee and catch up? I guess that's what I'm saying, Blaine, is that I find myself drawn a little bit more to that, as opposed to a lot of the engaging on threads. And to be more pointed to your question, because I hadn't intended this to be to kind of like skirt around it, but to address it more pointedly, I do like to engage with some of those posts and maybe put something very thoughtful and very personal or meaningful there. Like, hey, sending love from Denver, love seeing what you're doing out there. Really cool, or even pick up the thought and actually ask a thoughtful question about it. Because what I see a lot of out there, and what I feel I get a little, I don't know, skeptical about, is it feels to me like you can see when people have read the influencer handbook of get out there, raise, grow your audience by, one, affirm, two, ask a question, three, link to something that you have written. And it's like, dude,
Yeah.
it feels like you're getting played. And I think that that's something, in fact, I spent a lot of time writing about this morning. I think we're in a bit of a milieu of suspicion and skepticism because it kind of just seems like we're being tricked left and right all the time. Like somebody's trying to trick you. And I think that that's where I would just caution anybody. I mean, so there's my bit of advice. If you're going to engage with something, if you're going to share something, if you're going to post, think about how this can be useful, uplifting, positive for somebody. Think about how it can be authentic to your engagement with them, to your relationship with that person. Think about how it can be additive as opposed to a prescripted approach, because people are smart and they know when they're being seen as a means to an end instead of an end to themselves.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't realize I had so many thoughts on this until hearing you share some of yours. I totally agree with that. I think if I'm sharing something with a friend or that a friend wrote, I want to share it and say, this person wrote this and I think it's brilliant. You should check it out. I also get just a little irritated if I spend a few hours writing a really thoughtful 1,000-word blog post and I can tell that somebody didn't actually click on it and read the blog post. They just read the 2 lines I wrote kind of teeing up the blog post. And then they write, a 200-word comment that basically is like, I feel like they're trying to build an audience on the back of my really thoughtful work. And it's okay to do that, I suppose, but I don't prefer that approach for sure. The other thing you said that I'll just, I think maybe could stomp my foot on here as we wrap this up is it's probably important to think about why you're doing it in the first place. What is the true motivation of engaging with social media? And for me, it's so that I can build better, richer relationships in the real world. So for our business, I don't want to spend a lot of time on social media for the purpose of building an audience or like these kind of vanity metrics. I don't care if 3 people read a blog post that I wrote that I shared on LinkedIn. If one of them sends me an email and says, hey, can we talk about maybe bringing you guys in to work with my team? That's what I'm going for. So if it doesn't convert to real world, then I think for me, I'm missing the mark. So I'm always trying to think about that too. As an example, I'm having a 6 a.m. coffee virtually with a friend down in Tampa this week because he just writes really thoughtful stuff on his Substack and he shares thoughtful things on LinkedIn. And I'm really curious about his thinking and I like being engaged with smart people like that. And so we're going to pull it offline and have a direct communication now as a result of that. Right. So maybe that's the last thing I would say is for who, for what, is there a way that you can make your life or your business actually better for engaging in these platforms? And if you're doing it in ways that can, great. If you're just doing it to create a virtual world, for me at least, that's not what I'm going for.
Blaine, I'm really glad that you mentioned moving things to the real world, because I think that's really what it's all about. Is these networking platforms can be wonderful tools for us to engage with people, to lead to engaging in the real world, in the fully embodied world. And I've been reading a lot about the disconnection of embodiment, obviously, when you're in that digital realm, and how that can lead to, the keyboard warriors who say things to people by typing them on threads because they're faceless and they're frankly mostly nameless, when you would never say that to somebody in the real world. And I think that, for my part at least, I would just share that as an encouragement, which is, I find that it's valuable to use these kind of platforms to enable connection in the real world, whether that be a discussion over the phone or a coffee or a meeting, or whether that lead you to connecting to a buddy from high school, or seeing something that happened, like a buddy getting promoted, like my one of my oldest friends, from back in the day, Derek, getting promoted to fire captain, and you see stuff like that, and you just want to pick up the phone and say, man, congratulations, I'm so proud of you, I'm so happy for you, and just that real human connection. If we can keep that in mind, that this is a tool that can enable us to connect authentically in the real world, I think that can help it be incredibly generative, as opposed to some of, I think, the more problematic expressions of usage of this, where we mistake the digital world for the real world. And it becomes easy to get lost in that digital world. When you are performing, you have essentially become the star of your own reality TV show, and you're posting, and you're videoing, and you're cameraing and all that stuff of, look at the kids and look at this and that, as opposed to actually maybe engaging with Disney at Main Street or whatever it is, right? Like, if it pulls you out of the real world because we're so focused on what the expression looks like in the digital world, I would say that that's probably not super helpful in the long run. Far be it from me to judge anybody's usage or anything. We can all use it as we wish to use it. But I think the point that you're making, which is a good one to land on, is if we can use these tools to help us generate positive connections in the real world, and if we approach them in that manner, we're probably going to be okay. We're probably going to find these to be more additive than anything else. So I think that's probably a good place to land.
Yeah, I'll just want to say one more thing, which is I think a lot of us, especially in business, feel a sense of obligation to be on these platforms or to use these tools. And I would pause if that's the way you feel and say, look, you can use these tools. They can be very helpful, but use them thoughtfully, use them intentionally, and put things out that you're proud of, that you really want to stand behind, because that's going to be the stuff that gets people's attention. That's going to be the stuff that builds your reputation. That's going to be the stuff that gets you another client or a new gig, not feeling like, hey, it's a new day, so I gotta post a new thing. Because we see a lot of that content. Sure. We've been guilty of sharing it ourselves, which is it's just sort of, you're sharing something because you feel like you need to. And I think that's largely a waste of time. And so it kind of goes back to quality over quantity. We can all just probably take a breath and not feel like we have to be out there. We have to be engaging, or people are going to forget about us. I got a great piece of advice from our friend Matt Griffin one time when I was in the process of transitioning in my professional life. And he said, Blaine, you could probably just completely disappear for 6 months to 2 years. And when you're ready to come back, the world will welcome you back with open arms. So just don't rush it. And I feel that way sometimes about social media. It's like, when I have something valuable to say, I'll say it. And if I don't, I'll wait until I do. And that's maybe a good thing
sure.
to think
It also
about.
reminds me of our friend Steve Shenbaum, who cautions, hey, not everything needs to be a hot take. I love that. So we'll close it up here on this one. Thanks a ton for joining us and joining the conversation. If you have any thoughts about this conversation, send us a note. contact@appliedleadershippartners.com. We would love to hear from you. And if you have a question that you would like us to engage with, please send it to that email address as well. We'll see you guys next time.